Welcome to the Green Podcast. My name is Dylan Welch. I'm the CEO of green.org and Dylan Welch Media. Our goal with this podcast is to bring you the biggest names and leaders in renewable energy, clean technology, and sustainability so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and everything that is happening in this world. Not only that, you'll get some action items for your life so that you can apply some amazing things and make your world a better place as well. Let's get the show started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Green Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Welch, where we bring together leaders in business, technology, finance, all different types of careers who are passionate about not only finding success, but also giving back to the planet in one way or another. So I'm excited to talk to our guest today. I think he's the first ever attorney we've had on the show, doing some really cool things. We have Juan Pablo Alban, who's the owner and founder of his own law firm, joining us today. Juan Pablo, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dylan.
Yeah, so real quick, let's kind of dive in. Tell us about your background. Where did your passion for being an attorney start, and how did that kind of lead to where you are today?
Sure. So, I maybe mainly because of my family and a lot of them being lawyers, I was always kind of attracted to the field from the time I was a kid. It did get solidified as I was in college. So I applied to law school probably by junior year. I already knew. I was in law school out east, but I moved to Los Angeles to start my career. And I started it in 2001 working for big law. By that I mean kind of the mega corporate global law firms. I worked for Skadden Arps initially, and then Quinn Emanuel. And ultimately, I think it was a great experience. It was a really good time to kind of sharpen my teeth in the legal practice, lots of both trial experience and corporate experience. But I got frustrated as I got a little bit older by never being able to choose my clients and by the rigidity of the hierarchy of these big law firms. So I ultimately went in-house for a private investment firm, a family-owned investment firm in Los Angeles. And that's where my passion for renewable energy started. Where they were, for-profit investors, and from an opportunistic sense, this is 2008 right now, really wanted to figure out if they could fit into how to invest in renewable energy. So I learned a lot. We spent over a year doing very heavy due diligence on different companies, on different portfolios that were investing in projects, solar, wind projects, things like that. And ultimately, though, they would never really bite the bullet. Time after time, I was really interested in the industry. I wanted to focus my career on it at that point. And so there came an opportunity for me to walk away from that in 2013. And I started my own law firm with my wife at that point. She's a litigator. By that point, I had mostly done corporate M&A transactional work. And so we decided to focus on both things, and particularly on the transactional side, to focus on renewable energy clients. So that's been the story since then, basically. Not all, but most of my clients are in the space. And I love, helping people out. Most of them are trying to do good, also, obviously put bread on the table. And it's great. It's great to help them.
Yeah, no, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's nice, knowing the career path you wanted to go down from junior year. So helps make things a little bit easier. And then it's funny because we talked to a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and it's a very similar path. I feel like a lot of people kind of know what they want to do. They go into that corporate world. They realize they're like, all right, maybe this isn't for me, but they learn as much as they possibly can. And then they kind of make that career transition. So it's interesting to hear, even in the law space, that's possible as well. So what was, you must have been working on some really, big, amazing things at one of the biggest law firms, in the world. Like, can you share some sort of career highlights, that you experienced while you were there before you made that transition?
Sure. So there was this fascinating case I worked on that ended up going through a jury trial. Maybe somewhat ironically, considering where I went later, we were representing an oil and gas company, but they had a bunch of oil production and pipelines in Colombia, which is actually where I'm from. I moved to the United States when I was 9. And so even I was a young associate at the time, but the partners on the case kind of naturally saw a fit. So I ended up very heavily involved in traveling to Colombia, a bunch to interview people. They were basically just suing their insurance company because a bunch of guerrilla groups, or really one guerrilla group, was bombing their pipeline time after time. So They made an insurance claim for business interruption. the insurance company denied it, saying that that was an act of civil war or an act of terrorism, neither of which was covered under the policy at the time. So it became this huge act of disputing kind of what it was about. We had to get experts to see whether there was a civil war or terrorism. So, fascinating case. Ultimately, again, probably as interesting of a case as it gets. And that was one of the times I realized, well, I still didn't love working for this client. It was great. I felt like I did a good job, worked well with everybody, but it still wasn't my passion. So that's, my wife at the time was like, if you didn't like that case, it's probably time for you to think of, of alternatives, because that's about as interesting as a fact pattern is going to get,
Yeah, that's crazy. Where in Colombia are you from?
I was born in Bogota and lived there till I moved.
Nice. Yeah, I was just there for about a month earlier this year. Was in Cartagena, Medellin, Santa Marta. Beautiful place.
Those are wonderful places. Yeah, what took you there?
Just traveling, basically.
Oh, okay.
Finished up some big work projects and then wanted to take some time to go and explore. But wow, that is a really interesting case, kind of defining, what is a civil war, what is terrorism. Man, that's cool. And then tell us a little bit about that transition that you made. I know you said you went from one corporate sort of big law firm and then you went more into the financial side of things. Like, what was that transition like in your career?
Sure. Yeah. So it was something I think a lot of corporate law firm lawyers will do, which is to then go what's called in-house, to just be general counsel or maybe corporate counsel, depending on the size of the firm where you go. To then just have this one client, and you're an employee of the client of this just one client. So this was an investment firm, very opportunistic. It was family wealth, so they could ultimately invest in whatever they wanted. They didn't necessarily have a mandate the way most investment firms might. Their particular focus was private equity, so they wanted to take control, at least 50.1% control of whatever they invested in. So very activist that way, but also very cautious because they didn't have to do anything ultimately. And there, that is, when I first got there, was actually the beginning of the financial crisis in 2008, and they'd lost a bunch of money in the public stock markets. And so they were really looking to do more opportunistic private stuff. And that's how solar project developers, or actually just investing directly in solar projects, came into being for me to learn all about that and meet a bunch of people in that industry. So that was over a period of about 5 years where a good chunk of my time was spent in this industry.
Yeah. So doing that research, are you allowed to share sort of general information on what you found, like, growth in the industries or anything like that?
Yeah, I think maybe not client name specifically, but it's also outdated enough at this point, frankly. It was almost 10 years ago. What we found at the time was that, most companies actually lost money, certainly initially. And a lot of companies that seemed very promising and were raising a lot of money would run out and end up kind of being a disaster for investors. So that made initially them very cautious. We ended up, though, liking particular spaces where they could invest in more developed projects. So they were either already, they already had all their permitting, go ahead and start constructing. We've got a purchase power agreement signed for the next 20 years. That kind of investment really appealed to them, especially at the time. The yield on it, the returns on it, tended to be in the mid-teens probably, which was great, especially with so much uncertainty going on at the time. So that's where they started homing in more and more, was trying to find people that clearly already knew what they were doing to develop and had the credibility to sign these long-term purchasing power agreements with off-takers like, it could be anything. Walmart or a municipality, for example, might be a very common client.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. In an industry that's really rapidly sort of changing, especially in the past 10, 15, 20 years, it makes sense that you do really want to be cautious with what you're investing in. But it's good to hear that they did find some projects that were worth investing in, and they didn't just kind of pull the plug on the entire initiative. That gives a lot of hope.
Yeah, it did. And ultimately there was, I met such interesting clients that it actually gave me the opportunity to ultimately leave there to and form my own firm, because I knew I was going to have clients in the space from the beginning. So my first client, and one of the more important ones I still have to this day, is a private equity investor who they raise money from institutional investors, like pension funds or endowment funds, sometimes wealthy family offices like where I used to work. And then they're looking to just invest in either operating companies in the renewable space or projects. So it was a nice fit compared to what I'd been doing. Yeah, like I said, these guys remain clients 10 years later. It's been a good journey.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so now you have your own law firm. How long have you had your own law firm, and how has that been making that final transition into business ownership, being your own boss, getting clients? Tell us a little bit about that final stage of that journey.
Sure. Yeah. Hopefully it is permanent, like you said, and final. It was since 2013, so we're going on 10 years now in October. And it's been great. It's more of a roller coaster. Obviously, it's completely catch what you kill in terms of our income, which was never the case until we both decided to do that. But so that can keep us up at night. But at the same time, it gave us an opportunity to really be more active raising our kids. We have 2 kids that are teenagers now and more independent. But when we first started, it was just really great, not only to be able to choose our clients, but to be able to control our time and our schedule much more. Pre-COVID, as you'd remember, most people did require all the office time compared to nowadays.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's funny you mentioned that. Literally the last podcast guest I had on is a woman who said almost the exact same thing. She was working for, corporate America in a job she enjoyed, but she just wanted more of that free time to spend with her kids. And that was kind of one of the deciding factors to go out and start her own business. So finding, that career life balance is definitely important. Do you think, is that important in the law industry? Because I know in San Diego, I feel like there's a little bit more of that work-life balance than a lot of other places in the rest of the country. But in the law area specifically, do you see a lot of that, or do a lot of people just kind of go for it all in with their careers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a mix, but I have found that over time, especially as attorneys get older and they're able to make a good amount of money early in their careers, but the trade-off is working 100-hour weeks plus. You're just kind of nonstop. A lot of people burn out, and a lot of people are miserable doing that. And even though they're very smart and very capable and learn a lot, I have found a lot of my peers from law school, and then my wife's law school, she went to USC in LA, have decided to more intentionally push a work-life balance, become independent contractors where they'll either work for different law firms or smaller clients on a one-off basis, and that allows them a ton of flexibility. That's actually been a great opportunity for us as a more established law firm to hire great talent, but on a part-time basis. People don't want the 9 to 5 or 9 to 10 p.m., however it is you're going to frame it, but they're super talented people. They're great to work with. And there's actually a lot of lawyers in that, though.
It's the same thing in sort of the media space. I have a lot of people that work for me, and they aren't necessarily looking for those 9 to 5 jobs. They just want these projects that they can work on their own free time, and then they get paid, and it's kind of win-win. I like it that way too. It gives people more freedom, more opportunity to sort of be their own boss, take initiative. But yeah, I've heard, obviously being in that space is pretty demanding, 100-hour weeks. So I'm glad to hear that you're able to find that balance. Who are some of or maybe you can kind of share what you're comfortable with, but have you had any interesting cases or clients now that you've launched your own law firm?
Sure. Yeah, I've had there's several interesting things. So I'll give you a couple actually in the space, and one in which I became an investor in. But it was actually kind of like a lessons learned type of investing, because it was a really promising start and then kind of fell apart. But so one that we ended up in with a successful mediation was against we were the plaintiffs in this case, and it was a solar project installer, basically. But they didn't just do solar projects, but other kind of energy efficiency type of projects. And they had basically been, I think, in hindsight, in such a rush to sign a PPA contract and then an engineering, procurement, and construction contract that they kind of promised the moon in terms of what this project could deliver to the investors, And I think, looking at it, they were maybe a little bit careless in the way they they made those promises of, for example, how much solar production. I think they were a little bit careless also in the way they did all of the analysis, because there's like, even back at the time, this was probably 7 years ago now or so, there was very sophisticated software that if you actually implemented it correctly, you could get a really good sense of how much a specific panel project was going to deliver. But they did it very quickly. They didn't do it through a whole day or a whole couple of days. They didn't take into account seasonality. They missed all the shading aspects of trees. So anyway, at this point, the investors were all of a sudden finding themselves with, 30, 40, 50% underproduction compared to what was in the contract. And so they hired us to try to resolve that. And we did, after some tussle, some visits to Hawaii, where this project is. And I think it ended up working out okay, but I do think that it was painful for the developer, maybe more for their insurance company, thankfully, to have to pay a penalty amount for was ultimately a contract done a little too quickly.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know some stuff you can't talk about, but like, how does that get resolved? Is that the responsibility of the company that kind of made these false claims to solidify it, but they have an insurance that covers that? Is that how that works?
It is, yes. Typically, as long as it's not like intentional fraud, like you're actually intentionally trying to deceive people on production, an insurance company is going to step in and cover it if they're paying for professional insurance, which I would recommend every developer that's actually doing some big business does. For reasons like this, I don't think they were ever acting in bad faith. I think they were moving too quickly, and they needed to keep the churn going on their projects.
Gotcha. So they weren't sort of like changing up the numbers. It was more just like, we got to fill in this data and then send out the results without kind of fine tuning the little, minutia that is involved in that space. Man, that's crazy.
Yeah. So that's that. And then even there, actually, I think with some minor legal work in their contract, they probably would have been immune from liability, even their insurance company. I think they made promises that, maybe you've seen it in contract where it's in all caps, and these are the only warranties we're giving. Under no circumstances are we representing how much production because of all the different variability. They didn't have stuff like that in their contract, which actually made the case much more tenable for the investor.
Yeah, I'm surprised they don't like, hey, just a heads up, it could be cloudy a few days of the year, so this might change.
Yeah, exactly.
Good to know for future contract reference for anyone listening.
As
far as you personally, are there any, obviously you got to run your business, take on clients, pay the bills. Aside from sort of the things you have to do you have any specific clients that you really enjoy working with, or any areas of the law that you really like to focus on?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say that I've really enjoyed having the private equity client that is they're so dedicated. I do think in their mind the owners of this firm, they are for profit, but they really also want to do good, and I think that's part of that drives them more. I think they're saying just kind of seeing the writing on the wall, as I think most of your guests and most of the participants in your conferences they see the writing on the wall. We have to have cleaner energy. There's no question about that. So that really is a driver beyond profit that I think has been really great to be a lawyer for them. That's been good. On the litigation side, we have to be a little bit more opportunistic, and we don't only work with renewable energy clients, but it's been really great. We try to really focus on working for small businesses. We'll take a case on contingency, and we give them, we like to say Ivy League standard work based on our big law backgrounds. And we have to be by nature very selective in the cases that we take on. But once we do, we really do think that we're giving access to premier legal work to clients that there's no way they can afford the Scaddons or the Quinn Emanuels of the world and those insane hourly rates.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, if you're helping out these smaller businesses, especially in probably extremely stressful, tough times that could make or break them, depending on the case, that could eventually lead to long-term relationships and clients down the road. I'm sure they appreciate that as well.
Yeah, and so that's been very rewarding when we're able to do that. It's painful when we have to turn down cases, because most people I meet, I actually wish we could and had unlimited resources and time to do it. But
yeah, no, I appreciate coming on, and you're kind of touching on all the things that we really like to focus on with the green summits we put together, green.org. It's, we all need to pay the bills. We all want to make money. We all want to, get further in life. But at the same time, if we can do that while also doing something positive for the planet, or even just doing it for some sort of bigger cause, I think gives you that extra little inspiration to, get up out of bed every day, want to do a good job. I'm sure, I can't speak personally, I've never done it, but when you're working 100 hours for a corporate law firm and you don't really believe in the client that you're working in, I'm sure it makes it a lot harder to, get up, have that extra cup of coffee at 1 a.m. to finish that contract. Whereas, when you can work on an organization that, is trying to do something good and also make you money, it's kind of win-win. That's really what we like to focus on here.
That's the holy grail we look for, it.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as you personally, do you have what do you see your future goals? Do you want to continue building the law firm? Do you want to kind of continue focusing on any specific industries? Do you want to focus more on working with the small businesses, or a combination of all of those?
Yeah, I think I'm happy with the niche I'm in and out, but we are trying to grow it. We are, especially as our kids have gotten more independent and we find ourselves with more time. I love the clean tech space. Particularly where my expertise is in the generation of energy, but I think beyond that, and I've listened to several of your guests recently and some of the great stuff they're doing as entrepreneurs. I hope that I'm able to stay in that space, both on the corporate advice side and litigation is relevant, for sure.
Good. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And as far as, maybe this is more of a bigger picture question for you, but, coming from the corporate background, you worked in sort of the private investing and now you have clients. Are there any trends, industries, companies that you're kind of like, hey, 10 years down the line, not financial advice right here, but just sort of like, I'm going to kind of keep my eye on that. I think there's some opportunity down that line.
That's a great question. So, I think maybe I'll stick with geography. I think, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's basically in many ways a clean energy bill. So I actually think the United States, in my experience and in my clients' experience, has not actually been a great place to invest for the last 10 years, let's say, except unless you're somebody very wealthy that can take advantage of the structure of these tax credits that are offered. But most people actually can't, except for maybe their own house. Then you can have some nice tax credits. And I see that changing. I think that it is still subsidy driven, for better or for worse. But I think the opportunities in the United States itself, both in energy and in the development of clean tech, are going to be fantastic. And I think within that, though, you look, solar at this point is a very mature industry. And in a lot of places, especially if you can actually take away the subsidies that go to oil and gas, it's already a very, very competitive and cheaper source of electricity, as is wind, especially in combination. Batteries are really coming down in costs. And then I think something that I still see as more of a moonshot, but I think is more and more, and a lot of people are paying attention, is in hydrogen. I think some of your guests, from what I've listened to, have touched on that. I don't know that much about it. I want to learn more myself because I think there's tremendous opportunity there.
Very cool. Yeah. It is crazy just in the past 15 or so years watching all these different industries get so much more efficient kind of at the same time. The solar industry, the battery industry, electric vehicles, and they're all, they all are obviously connected, but at the same time, they're sort of growing at their own separate paces. But it will be interesting when they just keep getting more and more efficient and can work together. Yeah. Obviously, there's a long way to go. But do you think that is because of the Inflation Reduction Act we're kind of seeing that, or is it just simultaneous companies that have been working on this for a long time are now seeing those results of that R&D?
I think it's simultaneous. I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I think subsidies alone couldn't drive something if the tech and the viability of business models wasn't there. But I think it's a great accelerator.
Yeah,
especially if you're competing with other countries that are offering subsidies. I think that's the reality for investors often.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, all right, these companies, these scientists, these business owners have been building it, and then right now, this kind of big cash infusion comes, helps them sort of get over, hopefully, that last hump where we can really, get to that next level. That's interesting. Yeah. In the past, were there any specific countries that you saw were sort of ahead of the United States?
Absolutely. I think Japan was really ahead of the curve on solar development. Spain for a while was, but then they actually did something which actually California did early on as well, which was their incentives were almost too good, and then their infrastructure couldn't handle it. The grid couldn't handle all the solar at certain parts of the day. Something the United States hasn't done so much, but that Spain and Japan both did, was fixed tariffs. So they basically, it's the government, not a private company, saying, if you can develop this solar project, we'll guarantee an X price for electricity per kilowatt hour with X inflation built in. That's really good for investors, especially something like a family office. They love to see that. But all of a sudden, in Spain, everybody all of a sudden, very qualified bidders got projects. And yeah, their grid was just in overcapacity. So then they did something which I thought was awful, which was change the rules in the middle of the game, reduce those tariffs. So I actually think that was caused tremendous damage to the continued development of that there. But other countries in Europe, I think Belgium, Italy, still Japan. I know less about China, but I know that they obviously have a whole different system of doing business. But yeah, those have been, I think, ahead of the U.S. The U.S. is focused on this very complex tax equity incentive structure, which I hope is now changing because it will allow many more people to jump in.
Very cool. And in your just sort of general opinion experience, do you think that will sort of, once that comes through, push the United States sort of into that like top #1 spot in terms of leading the way in renewable energy?
I think so. I think the potential is definitely there. I'd love to have that question analyzed in 5 years or something, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love this show, because, we can have a conversation in 5 years from now and just sort of listen back on this episode and sort of track, where it's all come along. And I love having guests back on the show because I can be like, oh man, I remember we talked 2 years ago. How was, that whatever you were working on, and then get to sort of track that progress. So yeah. Juan Pablo, first off, I want to thank you for joining us today. Excited to announce Juan Pablo will be one of our speakers at the 2023 San Diego Green Summit. Can't wait to hear from you and just hang out with you. Is there anything, as we kind of wrap this up, last words, any calls to action that you'd like to share, with our audience, whether it's advice on starting your own business, advice on going into, becoming a lawyer, general life advice, how to raise kids? Leave us last final words of wisdom.
I could probably go on a little too long on all that stuff, but maybe I'll stick to the small businesses, which have been such frequent clients, and I love working on it so much. Is that it's always tempting to not focus on legal costs because it is a cost center and not a revenue generator. But I've just seen so many clients that early on they make mistakes, whether it be protecting their intellectual property correctly, or actually having the proper governance infrastructure in place that's going to allow them to raise money or significant amounts of money in 2 or 3 years. It's worth the time. I actually think AI has tremendous opportunity to save money in that area. But if you actually only do that, you're probably stepping into a big pile of problems. It's not sophisticated enough yet to really deal. So I think, don't cut costs early on to establish something that's going to allow you to grow exponentially 5, 3, 4 years from now. Very worth it. Yeah. One other one, I think, on sustainability. I think a lot of people and a lot of folks in the podcast want to talk about, individual efforts are great. But I think, the problem is so big that I do think people need to be very activist politically, I think, both locally and at a national level to get the policies in place that are going to help us change course. So I think the more of that, the better.
Yeah, no, that's good, because I don't really bring up like politics too much, but you're not talking about like left or right. It's more just like get involved with the people that have the power to do these things. And maybe, would love to have you on again and actually talk a little bit more about that, less of like sort of the political side of sustainability and clean technology, and more just from your experience, how people can get involved in a way that kind of leaves the politics out in a sense, not to get things messy. But I want to thank you for being here, Juan Pablo. Appreciate it. Can't wait to see you at the Green Summit. One last thing, if anyone is interested in connecting with you for, just chatting about any information we discussed, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Sure. If they go to info@Stuart Alban Law, and that's STUARTALBAN.com. You can find that on our website as well. Same domain. But I'll see that email very quickly, and I'm happy to consult. I'm happy to have a 30-minute, 1-hour conversation. That's not a client relationship. Just anybody listening to your podcast, I'm very happy to give them any advice that I can on an informal basis.
All right. Juan Pablo, thanks so much for being here. As I mentioned, Juan Pablo will be at our 2023 San Diego Green Summit. We just wrapped our New York City Green Summit. It was a great time. We hope to see you there. Juan Pablo, thank you again. And thank you to everyone who listens to the show, supports us on social media, joins us for these events. Our goal with Green.org, the Green Summit, the Green Podcast is to bring on experts like Juan Pablo, pick their brain, get some interesting stories, some information, and hopefully we can apply that to our lives, our careers, make more money, be more sustainable. As Juan Pablo said, what was it, the Holy Grail? So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Likewise, Dylan. Thank you very much for having me on.
Of course. Thanks again. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. My name is Dylan Welch. Appreciate it. As always, stay up to date with the latest information on green.org and dylanwelch.com. Dylan Welch Media is a full-service media and communications agency dedicated to promoting, marketing, and helping businesses in clean tech, renewable energy, and sustainability grow, get more clients, get more customers, get in front of their ideal clientele. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in joining the Green Summit, go to www.green-summit.org. Reserve your ticket today. There's very few spots left, so make sure you get on that ASAP. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.